Now, the digital classroom could mean a lot of things, but what we're going to be talking about is any classroom in which you're using any digital tool to convey information or communication to your students. Now, the other thing to think about when we start talking about the digital classroom is that we also understand that education has changed. Whereas some of you have been really waiting for a series just like this to get your digital classroom going, others of you are making a transition more because it's a necessity, not a desire. But that's okay, because here's the reality about the digital classroom. It is a broad spectrum, and that broad spectrum can be everything from a traditional classroom that doesn't qualify for digital status, if you will, to something that's entirely online, where you never have a face-to-face interaction with a student. But between those two extremes, there is a bunch of opportunity. It's almost like the dial on your stove or the thermostat on your wall that you can turn up or you can turn down to meet the needs of your students. And that's the beauty of the digital classroom. So what we're going to do in this series is we're going to figure out, how do I take something that is here, that for whatever reason, whether I wish to or whether I need to, and move that somewhere on this spectrum that is something that actually is adjustable. That you may need that digital classroom here for a while, but then you may need to dial it back to over here for a while, and that's okay. We have our digital classroom spectrum, but let's talk about a few waypoints or checkpoints along this digital spectrum. Over here you have the entirely traditional or face-to-face model. Over here you have the entirely online model where you don't have face-to-face components. In the middle is every version and every color, but there are a couple things that we can kind of give some names to. So if we move from the totally traditional face-to-face model, we move kind of one step in, and this is our tech in the classroom model, where the teacher is present, the teacher is leading the activity, but technology is being used. So that's our tech in the classroom. If you move over here into the center, this is where you have a division, where you have instruction and resources partially in the face-to-face environment and partially in the digital environment. Sometimes you would call this a blended classroom or a flipped classroom, but there's a lot of different names and there's a lot of variety in here. The key component to this is face-to-face is still key, but it's not the only source of information. You have digital as part of that source of information. As we continue to move over, now we take the face-to-face and we lower it and we raise the digital, and you get even further into what might be considered the blended classroom. In our case, we're going to call it the techie teacher, because here you have a solid tech framework that you're working with, but the teacher still has face-to-face components, but the face-to-face supplements the digital. So the digital is the primary source of information, the digital is the primary repository of information, and the primary means of communication, but face-to-face is still something that is used to supplement that digital model. Finally, you move all the way over to the digital environment, where everything is in that digital environment with no face-to-face. So here we go again. Traditional, tech in the classroom, shared, flipped or blended, the techie teacher, and then you have the all digital. So those are your 5 steps on the spectrum. Now, one other thing to make sure we understand. Just because it's over here in the traditional space does not mean it's bad, or does not mean it's good. Likewise, just because it's down here in the all online environment does not make it bad or good. None of these methods by itself is a value judgment. What we're really looking for is good teaching and good relationships across the board. Good teaching can happen down here face to face with relationships and communication. Good teaching can also happen up here with a solid and good digital relationship good teaching, good methods, but you'll notice that's the good that goes across the entire spectrum. We've all had horrible face-to-face traditional teachers that were either dry, boring, not engaging, disconnected, or just not great. We may or may not, depending on our personal life experience, have had a great online experience, but that doesn't mean it can't be a great experience. So this end is not bad, this end is not good. What's good or bad is how we utilize any of these methods or models in our classrooms. Because remember, good teaching above all else is relational, it is between the student and the teacher, and it is something that is intentional and drives the learning forward. So, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, our goal is good teaching.